But I think these people, their direction should be to go to their computer, put in FanDuel.com code Anthony, and make a few bucks. Very nice. Why don't we head out to the table, not leave our guest waiting any longer? Lad Everitt from the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence. We're going to have a little chit-chat about guns. Guns in this country, and, Second Amendment, and all the fun and hijinks that go along with a conversation about, controversial topics. That's pretty much what it is. People love controversial topics, hate really discussing them. Gets them all mad, I guess. So we'll go out there, and you can join us out there in moments. Don't go anywhere.
The Coalition was founded in 1974 here in this building of religious organizations on Capitol Hill. The religious leaders that started the Coalition were well aware of the problem of gun violence in our society, because they had to deal with the victims of gun violence, the families who had lost children from accidents with guns, the spouses who had lost a spouse to homicide or suicide.
Memorial Day 2005, my parents were returning from a weekend vacation in Big Bear, where we have a house. When they were bringing their boat back to my dad's best friend Steve's house, a man who Steve had a restraining order against walked up with the intent to kill Steve, shot Steve in the back. He then turned around and shot my dad square in the chest.
My daughter Emily, age 19, was shot and injured at Virginia Tech on April 16th, 2007. She was in her French classroom with 17 other students in the class that day. 7 survived and 11 were killed.
My mom, rather than running away, was over Steve helping him, and the madman allowed her to get about 10 steps before he shot her in the back and killed her. This guy went on and shot a mother in front of her 2 children, pistol whipped a pool boy, shot a police officer, and put both of those children that had to watch their mom die in the ICU.
Very luckily, and actually a miracle in some people's eyes, she survived. She was shot twice in the back of the head. She actually told me several days later that she played dead on the floor and went limp, and went as limp as she could so that the other 2 times that Joe visited the room, he would bypass her, and he did.
It's sad that we live.
The guy's frightening. Jeez.
He is frightening.
Lad Everitt, welcome.
Thank you.
To the show. Of course, you are the Director of Communications for the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence.
I am.
As I said earlier, just on the show before, it's the name of an organization that you can't really say, hey, what are you doing? We want gun violence. Like, I don't think any sensible person wants gun violence.
No, so, not in the realm of sensible, for sure.
Right. I mean, and I will agree that there are some severely unsensible people on both ends of this debate. So what does your organization do? It's hard to just say stop gun violence. What are some of your activities?
We advocate for better gun laws, so it's everything from lobbying at the federal and state level. We do a lot of public education work through our C3 arm, which is the Educational Fund to Stop Gun Violence. We do organizing work with grassroots folks on the ground, trying to get them better organized at the local and state level. It's a little bit of everything, and we also view ourselves as a little bit of like a think tank model where we're trying to change the debate around things, including what we call guns, democracy, and freedom, which is a broader debate about what the Second Amendment meant exactly and what role guns should play in a democratic society.
That does seem to come up a lot. The Second Amendment, the wording, the interpretation of it, and both sides seem to have their own take on what it meant and what it means today. What's your opinion or a stance on what the Second Amendment means?
Well, I think it's important to understand the chronology. The Bill of Rights, of course, comes after the Constitution. And the big debate back at that time was between Federalists who believed that our Union was basically dissolving at that point under the Articles of Confederation, and that the only way to preserve the Union was to strengthen the federal government, which was incredibly inept at that point. And then you had anti-Federalists who also agreed that the Articles were a failure, but were a little bit skeptical about how far we'd go in strengthening federal power. When James Madison, who's also the author of the Second Amendment, he's the primary author of the Constitution, drafts the Constitution, in Article 1, Section 8, he puts that the federal Congress would have the ability to organize, train, equip, and discipline the state militia. That freaked a lot of anti-federalists out.
Sure. Who
made what I think is a relevant point at that time that, hey, if you're going to give the federal Congress the ability to arm us, what would stop them from simply withholding arms and effectively disarming the state militia? And that was, if you go back and read the ratification debates at the state level when the states were deciding whether to ratify the Constitution, that was a major topic of discussion, brought up by people like Patrick Henry and George Mason and some of the other major anti-federalists at that point. So Madison, and there were many other concerns about the Constitution, of course, that reflect other amendments in the Bill of Rights.
Sure, yeah, you could debate every amendment
and there
based on time and context.
Sure. So Madison, takes all that seriously, and Madison wants to see the Constitution ratified. So his compromise essentially with them is, listen, guys, if you'll help me get the Constitution ratified, you have my promise that I'll go back to the drawing board immediately and I'll hammer out the Bill of Rights and I'll address all the concerns that you've laid out here. And he does that. So he goes back and he lays out the 10 amendments, and the Second Amendment essentially was Madison's nod to, the concern of anti-federalists and people who were concerned about state rights, to guarantee that moving forward, the militia would be solely armed. Well, the ideal was solely armed by privately held weapons, that the people do, that a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state, which they did believe because they were so terrified of standing armies at that point based on their experience with the British, that, hey, guys, it's going to be privately held firearms that these guys are going to come out and drill, train, muster, and serve with when they're serving in the state militia.
Exactly.
And that's what the debate around the Second Amendment at that time reflects. If you go into the surviving, for example, House debate over the Second Amendment, there's no discussion of, shooting the criminal who jumps through your window and the ski mask or whatever.
Right.
There's no discussion of individual self-defense whatsoever. It's discussion about essentially federalism, the principle of federalism, who should control the militia, and did the Constitution leave us too vulnerable to encroaching federal power should the standing army at some point grow exponentially, which it has, of course, over time.
Yeah. But as far as an individual's right to own a firearm, to have a firearm for private protection, because obviously the times have changed. The need for to muster a state militia doesn't seem that necessary anymore, but it is still in the Constitution, and it is there, and it seems to be something that is easily interpreted. It's not a very long-winded amendment. Do you believe people have the right to protect themselves with firearms?
I don't believe that the Second Amendment conferred an individual right for self-defense against a criminal or, I don't know, whatever other type of daily altercation you might find yourself in. I would, but let me state outright that the Supreme Court disagrees now. The 5-4 Heller decision, Justice Scalia, wrote that opinion and made clear that he does believe there is an individual right to own a handgun in the home for self-defense. So that's my personal opinion. That's not what the law says.
Right.
I do recognize that the law says it's different. But no, going back and looking at that debate, reading the Federalist Papers, reading Madison's writing at that time, his correspondence with others, reading the ratification debates about the right to keep and bear arms, I can't find any evidence that it had anything to do with shooting a criminal or a thug or anything like that. But it's also important to note that throughout our entire history, there's always been a rich common law tradition of protecting people's right to self-defense.
Exactly, and that's kind of what I'm getting at now. As far as the Second Amendment goes, yes, I don't see anything in there either that addresses the right to self-protection. But again, when we look in the context of the time and the environment when the documents were written, isn't it common sense to assume that those people in those times wanted to defend themselves? There was a lot to defend themselves against back then. Their families, their loved ones, their land. There was a lot to defend. Isn't it common sense to think that that was something that was so obvious that it didn't need to be put in the Constitution or the Bill of Rights?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so?
No, I think if you read the ratification debates in the states, if you read the Federalist Papers, Madison, Hamilton, the rest of these guys laid it all out on the table. Everything was discussed ad nauseum. My favorite essay on this is Madison's Federalist number 46, which does a beautiful job of describing his vision of the state militia and how that could oppose potential federal tyranny. So no, look, I'm not saying that firearms were not a popular part of American tradition or that they were not back then they put food on the table, right?
Sure.
They were critical. They weren't so much self-defense firearms. No one was packing a handgun with a 15-round mag. We're talking more about muzzle bearing loaded firearms and things along those lines. But, looking at the Second Amendment specifically and what they were debating about, it's changed 180 degrees today. So, for example, there was this, the real reason for the Second Amendment was this incredible fear of a standing army and how that would lead to oppression. Well, the most trusted institution in America today is our military. You know that. Every national opinion poll, which American institution do you trust the most? It's the military. There are fathers, our wives, our brothers. We glorify them now.
Right.
So that's gone. And then the other thing that's gone is, the ideal of the Second Amendment was to be that the militias would be armed by privately held weapons. Unfortunately, in practice, it didn't work out quite that well. The militias weren't that effective. The government had to repeatedly supply them with weapons even after the amendment was ratified. And now, of course, today's equivalent of a well-regulated militia, the National Guard, is solely armed by the federal government. You don't buy your AR-15 at the gun show and bring it to Iraq.
But I don't think the framers' idea, when you talk about the Second Amendment, is that the National Guard is that standing that militia. I cannot see anyone thinking that a portion of the standing army, the federal military, on a state level, you would want people armed to defend against tyranny.
Well, the National Guard by federal statute is the organized militia. It's not. We can't totally tell how the founders would have felt about that because it happened in the 20th century. But to be clear, the militia back in our founders' days was a military. It was part of military. They performed military service. They fought in foreign wars. They fought against Native Americans. You name it, they did it. They fought, they ran bears out of your yard. They were out there serving, and and it was a duty. It wasn't like, hey, if you feel like drilling today, come on out. If you didn't drill or do your duty, you were punished. It's almost like a moot point, though, discussing, because as you stated, the Supreme Court decided. True. Made their opinion known about the second. I think when you look at a line like, the people's right shall not be infringed, it seems odd to think that the people would be some people, the certain people that are in the National Guard, the state militia. I believe the militias were mustered up from the baker and the butcher and the fucking if you were a white man between the ages of 18 and 45, there's another whole. I'm about 2 years from aging out of that ball game. I'm certain. You're a little more certain than they were. That there were horrid things going on back then when these people were supposedly
writing what was supposed to be the rights of all Americans. Yes, that wasn't the case. Another discussion, perhaps at another time. So the Supreme Court, their opinion and what they've said about the Second Amendment. Why should a government agency tell us how we should best defend ourselves and our loved ones against threats that do have superior firepower?
Well, I think a government's the first duty of any government is to protect the public. If a government can't protect the public, you don't really have a government. I mean, you have anarchy, essentially. What a government should do, if it's functioning properly, is it should de-escalate an arms race between police and civilians, not escalate it. Right now, if you go back to when I was born, essentially, you had cops using revolvers, and that's essentially the level of firepower they were facing on the street. Fast forward to today, and it's semi-automatic handguns, high-capacity magazines, and an AR-15 in the trunk. And I don't think it's because cops, enjoy, enacting, action films. I think it's because that's the level of firepower they're seeing out there. So, to me, the government's role should be to de-escalate that arms race to the point where a cop can go out and safely serve on the streets without strapping on body armor and having that Glock pistol with a high-cap mag. So, to me, that's the role of government. That's what government should do. We shouldn't have to, to me, freedom is not having to walk out on the street with an AR-15 and a 33-round mag. That, to me, is the absence of freedom.
What would you suggest to put Pandora back in the box? Because without some type of radical infringing on people's right, I don't see this magical way to remove these guns and going back to Barney Fife with one bullet in his pocket kind of law enforcement.
Well, look, I don't think you need a radical solution. I think the NRA wants you to think that, so the fundraising keeps going. But no, it's simple things that pretty much every other free society has done. It's things like making sure you have a background check on every gun sale, unless it's a dad transferring a gun to his kid or something like that. Doing better screening at the point of purchase, so that, if you have a guy like Jared Loughner or James Holmes, a guy like James Holmes who told his psychiatrist he was going to commit mass murder, but we don't have a law to put him in the NICS database, the FBI database that goes through the background check, things like that. So where if you have a guy who's clearly dangerous, mentally ill, or a guy who might not be a felon, but he's had a history of violent misdemeanor convictions for things like assault and battery. Let's say he has 12 of those and we're still letting him legally buy guns. Basically, if you go back...
How big of an issue is that? Because I don't really see people that are so unqualified. I see every time...
You read about mass shootings?
But you're reverse engineering it. You're taking the people that have done the mass shootings and seeing how they acquired guns and saying, well, look at that nut got a gun.
Right, and then the question begins, who knew that they were like that?
Right,
and very often the answer is everybody did.
But for the most part, those aren't the people that are purchasing these huge amounts of guns that are out there in this country.
And then the question becomes, who is being infringed by a good, thorough background check? And the answer is nobody.
I understand that too, but even the stuff you stated, how is that going to be carried out? How would a psychological profile be carried out?
Yeah.
What's the criteria to making someone ineligible to buy a gun based on his psychological profile?
Well, I can tell you
now. Some people might think, hey, he went to a psychiatrist when he was 14 and talked about violent dreams because maybe his parents were beating him. This comes up now and goes, well, we can't have that guy have a gun. Like, who makes that decision?
Well, right now, the standard right now was designed in 1968 in the 1968 Gun Control Act. Yeah, long time ago, right? I was probably not even a thought at that point. And basically what it is if you've been involuntarily committed, forced to go into an institution,
right,
or if you've been adjudicated by a court is what was called then a mental defective, which is a term you might use here on this show, but you might not hear in polite company otherwise.
Sure.
You know, you're prohibited from buying firearms, right?
Yes.
The problem with that, and that works both ways. That's unfair both ways, because to be perfectly fair to your point, you might have someone who is involuntarily committed, they've been treated for their condition, and they're fine now to own firearms. They're safe, right? But you also get guys like, for example, the Northern Illinois University shooter in 2008, a guy named Stephen Kazmierzak, who had attempted to kill himself like 5 or 6 times and been institutionalized another handful of times, every time voluntarily, who was obsessed with Nazis and killing and the genocidal program of Hitler and mass shootings. Everyone around him knew he was severely mentally ill, who legally bought the guns used in that shooting. Or you could have a guy like James Holmes, who I mentioned before, who literally threatened to kill his psychiatrist at the University of Colorado and told her, I am going to commit mass murder, who legally bought guns in Colorado.
Now that right there, and I obviously not a lawyer, but I do know something about patient doctor privilege, and I do believe when a statement like that is made, that it is the responsibility of the doctor to inform law enforcement.
You'd be surprised.
Threats are made. Now,
not all states allow you to do that.
If they don't do that, now you're starting a chain of events that I usually see the gun itself, the tool of the destruction and death, being the main focus of the blame. And that,
well, do you have a problem? Look, after James Holmes told that to his psychiatrist, do you have a problem being put in NICS for a background check and prohibited as a purchaser of guns?
I believe in a background check, of course that should come up, because it should have been that information should have been given to the authorities.
Then we're on the same page.
Yeah.
That's what I'm calling for. You can't do that right now. You can't. That is not a disqualifier right now under the 68 law.
But here's the rub. Here's what ends up happening. That sounds good. It's reasonable. And that, when people say reasonable gun control, that's reasonable. I have no qualms with, every gun I bought.
Tell me when I say something unreasonable.
All right.
No, tell me when I say something unreasonable.
When a qualm comes up.
Okay.
It's the criteria. It's, all right, that's good. I love the idea that a friggin' lunatic that stated to a psychiatrist that he wants to kill people shouldn't be able to get a gun. I don't know. I know a lot of people that enjoy guns and hunting. I'm not even a hunter. I don't like killing anything. I'm a target guy. I love the challenge of, I love deer are beautiful and things like that. I don't mind hunters. They're doing what they do, but I don't like killing anything. I enjoy shooting. I enjoy the challenge. I enjoy putting that target way far away and trying to get the skill to hit it.
And getting better over time.
And getting better. It makes you feel good like anything else. Like shooting darts while somebody's lighting fireworks. It's, I do enjoy that. What I don't like is the criteria. I don't think anybody I know, and I've known a lot of people that own guns and they're very responsible, that would want him to get a gun, that wouldn't want some rule in place that guy cannot get a gun. But it's when these, it's like, okay, now it goes to people that legislate. And it's like, okay, we'll do this. He said that. All right, I'm also going to draw in here that a guy that he was accused, let's say, and this happened to my brother. He was going through a divorce. He's a gun owner, never had an issue. He actually recorded his soon-to-be ex-wife she hit herself with a frying pan in the face.
Why?
Called the cops.
Oh, to set him up.
He punched her. He's like, I got it on video. The cops don't want to hear it at the time. Joe's a great guy. He went with them. They took his guns. And he had to go through a lot of hoops to get them back, even after it was proved that he never did anything.
But he got him back.
Yes, he did get him back.
Okay.
But now, would something be added where, we go down a few notches from the lunatic that wants to kill people and told the psychiatrist that he wants to? Like, who's making that bottom line where, all right, everyone below the line can own a gun, but everyone above it we deem too crazy?
Yeah.
Is it videos that you've been watching online? Is it video games that you play? Who's doing this? Who would do this?
Well, I mean, the real answer to your question is legislators would make those determinations, right, after consulting experts. But the more basic answer is that in terms of what we're advocating for, it should be based on history of violence. That's even if we're just talking about mental illness,
right.
Like being depressed should not stop you from getting a gun. However, if you've indicated to someone you're suicidal or there's been violent attempts on your own life, but, you know, if you're making attempts on your life, that might be a consideration there, right? That indicates history of violence. Or if you've been violent towards others, right, where you're the guy that has 12 convictions for assault and battery. There's a history there. That's what it should be. Beyond that, it shouldn't be anything. I mean, in terms of the domestic violence thing, there is a debate now over whether someone should be prohibited. Like a permanent restraining order would occur when you've gone before a judge, you've had due process.
Right.
The judge has heard, you know, your wife's case, they've heard your case, and then the judge makes a decision as to whether to enact. It's called a permanent restraining order. It could be like a year or whatever. Temporary restraining order, there's a broader debate about that, because that's not a process where you've had the man has had the process to go before the judge and present his own case. But that's a little bit of a gray area, because we also have a lot of good data showing that that's an incredibly dangerous period for a woman in those cases.
Oh, absolutely.
But
I wouldn't argue that.
That's a case, I think, kind of where you're getting at, where due process hasn't occurred, and there's every room for a reasonable debate about whether someone should be prohibited.
Right. I think though, when man, I wish I could trust legislators to not stomp on our rights, as we've just seen it happen time and time again.
Well, you got to vote then.
Well, I do. I do. But when you're in a state like New York, it's a little rough. We saw Governor Cuomo come in, and shortly after the horrid shooting in Connecticut, in Newtown, just overnight, signed a bill that said we are not selling assault weapons. The scary word, I understand, assault weapons. You can't get them anymore in New York. I've owned them. I've known many people that own these assault weapons. They're not used in many crimes. They're just not. The majority are cheap handguns by a criminal element. A lot of gangs. That's the majority of what the killings that we see on a yearly basis with guns. Are there tragedies? Of course. Are there accidents? Of course. You're looking at a tool that is used by millions of people. In any situation, it's going to cause death or injury. A refrigerator falling on a kid's head. The car. You know, you always hear about that. And I hate even bringing up that argument at this point. Everyone on Twitter, well, cars are dangerous. Yeah, we know. But there's a responsibility that goes along with legal gun ownership. There are laws in place to try to prevent criminals, try to prevent criminals from owning guns, try to prevent moving guns out of states.
Not really.
You know what?
We have in that way we have the weakest laws in the civilized world.
The second you cross the New York state line with guns from another state, you are breaking a law that already exists. And why then legislate
but when's the last time
me? More laws against me. Give me a magazine capacity limit. Because why? What will that possibly do?
Well, man, you said so much there. I don't even know where to start. I mean, in terms of trafficking, our laws curbing, in terms of how we act to curb firearm trafficking across state borders, we have the weakest laws of any free country in the world by far. No one's even near us. Gun dealers in this country are essentially allowed to operate out of like something out of the show Mad Men. The NRA blocks us from requiring gun dealers to computerize records. It's very, because you'd end up in a FEMA camp, Anthony. It's very dependent on the state, sometimes even the city. It's very because crazy from state to state. So you can't just blanket say gun dealers are this. Well, let's be clear. You live in New York. Yeah. State level gun dealer regulations, so they go beyond the federal level. You also, by the way, have the third lowest gun death rate of the 50 states. In New York? No, New York. Of the 50 states has the third lowest gun death rate of the 50 states. So the gun laws here, I mean, we can argue as to whether they went too far. I agree with you. I think that legislation, certainly it was rushed. It was done quickly on purpose. And there was stuff in there too, like, you know, for example, as I understand it, you correct me if I'm wrong on the specifics, but I think originally they limited magazine size to something like 6 rounds, right?
Yeah.
And then there was so much response to that I think they then peeled that back. What was it, 10, maybe 15? I don't even know.
They and it just showed the lack, either a lack of knowledge of firearms. And if you're legislating against firearms, I think you should be knowledgeable on even the mechanics of how they work. I think is very important for a legislator to know. We've seen an amazing amount of ignorance in people that want to pass gun legislation that know nothing about the guns themselves.
Well, legislators don't need to be experts on every single topic.
Well,
no one's making that,
but
no one's making that argument about legislators regulating women's reproductive health care.
I understand.
You know a man who's had an abortion or given birth? Right? No one's making that argument about reproductive health care.
No.
And men feel perfectly entitled to regulate that up the wazoo.
Yeah, well, you won't get an argument from me.
No, legislators don't have to be experts, but they should consult with experts.
They should, okay, yes, they should at least be knowledgeable, I think, on what they're trying to legislate. But
New York has done gun violence prevention well. Again, you have the 3rd lowest gun death rate of the 50 states. You're not likely to be shot here.
I do believe that a lot of that has to do with the amazing job that Giuliani did in New York City, which was rampant with gun crime before his administration. So I don't think you could just say, hey, the gun laws are what made this happen. I'm sure you're not an advocate of stop and frisk.
I'm not, but on another...
You don't think that cut down on the amount of homicides that took place in New York, because the city itself.
Well, no, I think you're right there. Look, I think when you enact a gun law, you're trying to balance public safety and individual rights, right? And you want to get that sweet spot, which is right in the middle. And I don't agree with stop and frisk, because I've talked to a lot of good people that live here that were personally injured by it, or their kids were. So, so no, I do think there's a point at which you can go too far in infringing on individual liberty.
Sorry, people.
But I don't think a background check is one of them.
No.
And I think too, although your point about assault weapons is well taken. Yeah. Everybody draws that line somewhere. I would imagine you don't want Americans walking around with backpack nukes. But that's always parity with the U.S. government.
That's always the extreme.
And you're trying to find sweet spot. I don't. But personally, I do want to find that sweet spot, because I don't think a healthy, free society has citizens walking around with battlefield rifles.
All right,
and harassing cops and things like that.
I know that,
like we're seeing happen in Texas and elsewhere.
Many states do not allow just Joe Citizen to buy military-grade weapons. You can buy...
Sure they do. Let's be perfectly frank here. A lot of the weapons that our soldiers are serving with overseas, not all of those weapons are select fire. A lot of our soldiers serve with semi-automatic fire weapons only. So very often, these guys are carrying the same exact weapons.
Whatever weapon is there for the job. There are also people that carry Colt 1911s on their hip for military service, and those are perfectly legal to own here.
Right.
You can't just pick and choose like, oh, it's a semi-automatic.
You have to pick and choose.
Well, no, but if
you don't pick and choose, you have anarchy, and then you got the backpack nuke on your back.
But if you say that just because the military uses a semi-automatic version of their assault rifle, that should be off the table for the public, that they're walking around.
Why not?
They're walking around with military weaponry.
Why not?
As I said, what about a Colt 45 1911? That is a very common weapon. How about a revolver on your hip if some soldier wants to walk around with that?
I don't think a 6-shot revolver is a weapon of mass murder. But I mean, if you look at mass shootings in this country, you see 2 common elements. Number one, high-capacity mags are almost always used by mass shooters. They want capacity. They don't want to have to stop and reload. When they have to stop and reload, guys like Loeffner get tackled and it's stopped. The other thing you commonly see, and you are right, handguns are overwhelmingly the choice of criminals because they're concealable, and that makes a lot of sense. But for mass murderers, for people involved in mass shootings or attacks on police, or the kind of Cliven Bundy contingent who are preparing for war with government, things like AR-15s are enormously popular because they're very good at killing a lot of people in a short period of time.
Yeah, and we're seeing a lot of crazy people using these to kill. If we start legislating legal, responsible people based on what crazy people do, we would legislate everything away.
We do legislate everything. That's why this argument is so inane.
No, we legislate everything away. We
regulate every other potentially dangerous product in America. That's why this argument is so inane. We do that. The only place we're not doing it is for guns, for cars. Anthony, I know you and I have never sped on this nation's highways. We've never sped.
I'm a legal.
But it's those crazy people that do, and that's why we have to have the damn speeding limits, Anthony. I can't take it.
But
we regulate everything. It's such a dumb argument. Give me a better argument.
There's a difference between speeding and plowing into a crowd with your car. And there are people...
And there's a difference between a single-shot, rifle and an AR-15 with a 100-round drum magazine and the rate of fire of that weapon, firing semi-auto. There's a huge difference.
Not that it matters to the argument or anything, but I would love to see a 100-round drum mag that didn't jam after 5 fucking shots. Those things suck.
And you're right. And what's still scary is a kid in Aurora in that theater, James Holmes, who had no police experience, no military experience, and his 100-round mag did jam, still shot 70 people in less than 2 minutes.
Right. I understand. He was...
That's a problem, friend.
Crazy. He was batshit crazy.
Yeah, and how do we tell him from you at the point of purchase without better background checks?
Well,
we don't.
I've never bought a gun without a background check. I have no problem with that.
Because you live in New York.
And
it's difficult to do so. But if you, for example, like where I live in D.C., I can go right across the border in Virginia. If I was a Virginia resident, I could buy anything I wanted.
The second you have the intention of driving back to D.C., you've broken a law that is already...
And who's going to catch me?
I don't know.
Is there a plastic bubble over D.C.?
Then we need... Oh, so what are we supposed to do? Have gun detectors at all the borders?
No. That gets back to dealer regulation, because guns don't... crime guns don't grow in a tree. They come from an FFL. They come from a federally licensed firearms.
Illegally. After that, you could buy anything. I could buy a fork from the mall, and it's a legal fork. The second I jab it in someone's face, I'm committing a crime.
Right, but look, the point is, you've told me during this conversation that you don't want a guy, that you personally wouldn't want a guy like James Holmes to get a gun.
Right.
Or someone who's intent on trafficking those guns to criminals.
Yes.
The question then becomes, do you want to do something about it? If you want to do something about it, you got to do 2 things. Number 1, you got to screen every gun purchase and make sure that screening is meaningful. And number 2, you have to have better regulation of dealers, because they operate like something out of the 1950s. They're keeping paper records. They're not required to computerize sales. So when a guy who's running guns constantly comes in the store, and if you go to a Walmart, any other store, you have a computerized record, right? They've got your member card. They know what you've bought over the last, I don't know, probably 10 years.
Right.
You go into a gun store, it's fucking paper records. They're not seeing anything. They're not seeing, holy crap, this guy bought 5 guns last month, 10 of the exact same model handgun 2 months ago. Don't sell this guy guns. They don't see any of it because they're not required to computerize records. They're not required to run background checks on employees so they can have criminals working for them who are selling guns out the back. It's like something out of Mad Men.
I would really love to know how often that happens.
Constantly.
Constantly. That gun store employees are selling weapons illegally.
Are you familiar with the D.C. sniper case?
I'm not saying it doesn't.
Whoa, stop.
Yes, absolutely.
Stop.
But I'm not saying it doesn't happen.
Are you familiar with the D.C. sniper case? You are?
Yeah.
How do you think that gun made its way from Tacoma, Washington, all the way across the country?
Completely illegally, that's how.
No, it made its way because this guy, Brian Borgilt, who ran the Bullseye Shooter Supply store out there in Tacoma, had people working for him who he told me personally to my face one day that he didn't trust at all. He had something like 238 guns go missing from his shop in a period of 3 years, and his explanation was essentially, you know what, I had some people working for me I just couldn't trust, right? No background checks have to be done on those people. He can hire people that just got out of prison for raping a kid.
What a dummy, then.
Okay?
I mean, if you own a business and run a business,
it happens.
It should be your own responsibility as a smart person to maybe check out who's working in your store.
But trust me is not a law enforcement strategy. Trust me is not a public safety strategy. We need to decide one of two things. Do we want to trust them? Do we want to trust James Holmes and Jared Loughner and guys like Brian Borgelt? Or do we want to actually have laws in place that make damn sure they're doing the right thing?
Like I said,
I'd prefer the latter.
I don't mind background checks. I don't. I think they're
Do you mind dealer regulation that takes advantage of the technology you've been bragging about on this show?
Dealer regulation is
like requiring
such a broad
Well, here, simple question. Do you think a gun dealer in the year 2015, when we all have real-time technology right in our pocket, should have to videotape gun sales?
What would that be used for?
Deterring straw purchasers who come in with a clean record to buy guns for criminals, and that happens constantly in this
And
country.
maybe it'd be used if
some
guy with a lot of money decides every week he wants to buy a new pistol.
And what would that guy
start looking and going, what the fuck is this guy doing?
And then
with
what would they arrest him for?
I don't know. New legislation could be enacted tomorrow. How about this? What would they arrest
this is for guns that show up on crime scenes.
I understand.
For crime scenes that are traced from crime scenes.
What would they, but you say what would they arrest him for? You can't base what people are going to be arrested for.
They would be arrested for guns.
Legislation, because put it this way, New York, Cuomo passed his laws about assault weapons. Cuomo passed his magazine capacity laws.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, the legal, law-abiding people that have done nothing but pay attention to the law are now breaking these laws.
No,
because they don't know that it was even changed overnight.
Oh, God, give me a break.
I swear to you, a lot of people didn't know they went to 7 rounds capacity.
You're telling me pro-gun guys don't know the laws changed in New York?
The smart, responsible ones.
They all know it.
But not on the day. When you have a legislation for 7-round maximum in a magazine, and then you outlaw 10-round mags, and then there's only 5-round mags. They don't make a 7-round mag.
Who's done prison time?
You're in essence saying, here's 5 rounds.
Who's done prison time? Who's done prison time for the 7 to 10?
No one I know of yet, but there have been numerous arrests.
Okay, so no one has actually been convicted or done any time.
I don't know. They might have been. I don't know.
I would imagine if it has happened, probably someone would have called you by
Someone
now.
Probably would have, but there have been
there is no
arrests.
infringement, or there's no great pain or suffering on the part of New York gun owners. It's a bunch of, it's a FEMA camp stuff.
I don't think so.
Come on. Are you still going to the target range and enjoying your shooting?
I think, sure.
God bless you.
Sure. It's
what's the bellyache here?
But I'll tell you what,
you've got the 3rd lowest gun death rate of the 50 states.
Again,
you're not likely to be shot. The people you love aren't likely to be shot. Now look, and I'm not
thank you, law
saying
enforcement. I don't think the draconian gun laws in New York have made us any safer.
They have.
Because again,
that's nonsense. They have.
Because again, legal, law-abiding citizens aren't the one doing these terrible things.
But it's not a theoretical debate. They have made you safer.
Do you honestly think somebody meaning to do people harm are going to pay attention to the 7-round limit in a magazine? Who is that legislating against?
No, I think if someone is caught with that level of rounds in a magazine, they'll be arrested and convicted. That's the point. Now, look, first of all, it's not even there anymore. As I understand it, it's up to 10 now. So that was changed.
Oh, you know what?
Which is an example of government working.
All the laws, and I'm still not sure. I have 7 rounds in my gun because I'm not even sure if I could put 10 in.
Are you surviving? With 7 rounds, does that get you through the day?
Yeah, because now I carry 2 extra magazines, so I'm carrying 3 times the ammo I used to.
Yeah, and you're gonna have biceps like Schwarzenegger next year.
Good job, people.
But look, it's funny, but it's also ridiculous because none of this has affected anybody's quality of life. No one's in a FEMA camp. You're not a slave state, and the laws work. You have the 3rd lowest gun death rate of the 50 states.
Your take again, it's not based on. Show me how it's based totally on the gun laws. New York has always had very strict gun laws.
What other rate? First of all, by the way, you're also not a source state for guns that are trafficked elsewhere. For example, in New York City, 90% of the crime guns in New York City come from outside states.
Yeah, you know what guns cost in New York?
Why?
It's crazy.
Oh, bull. That's nonsense. The reason for it, and you know this damn well, is because criminals can't get guns here.
It's very difficult for
It is incredibly difficult. There's no unregulated sales in New York.
You are absolutely right.
And the screening now is better. Also far better in the area of mental health. So the gun laws, my friend, are working beautifully here. Now, whether you feel they've gone too far, is a question.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not a question as to how effective they are. They've reduced gun violence beautifully.
Do you believe that the government should be aware of every gun that everybody owns? There should be a record of every gun that every citizen in this country owns.
Absolutely, the same way as it is for cars. The same way as it is for cars, because because states that have licensing and registration instill more accountability on the part of gun owners, and they have lower rates of gun death consistently. Why is it important? Because when you're licensed and registered, you can't take that gun and move it through a private transfer with no paperwork, no accountability whatsoever. You are responsible for that weapon. And if that weapon turns up on a crime scene, police don't need to go to the manufacturer, then go through the distributor, then go to the dealer, then scrounge literally through paper records like something out of Mad Men trying to find your name. They can go right to the registration and see who has that gun.
What a beautiful scenario in a utopian society.
No, it's a beautiful scenario in every other free country.
Never oversteps their boundaries when they regulate and register and keep tabs
let me ask a question.
on people's possessions and income and materials and weaponry.
Well, let me ask a question then. Let's go from because you've been in the theoretical. Let's go to the real life. Are you aware of a democracy in the world today that has they all have licensing and registration but us?
5 times.
Well, no,
and I'm theoretical.
No. Well, let's go here. So basically every other free country in the world has licensing and registration of gun owners. Are you aware of anyone where they've been enslaved or something horrific has happened?
No, the United States is always looked at on this planet as a very unique country. We pride ourselves.
So you're not aware of anything happening in another free country because of licensing and registration?
You know what?
Why not?
Aware because I don't really care what other countries' gun policies are. I'm very busy trying to hold on to my Second Amendment.
You know who cared about other countries' policies when they were designing government? Our founders.
Well, I understand that, but I'm not going to pay attention to what a different country with a completely different setup, history, everything.
Why? Your theory is that licensing and registration inexorably leads to enslavement or something.
No.
So why would it? If these other countries are not as free of us, why would they not? Why are these people not in FEMA camps or something over there?
We can't talk about the wonder of the United States being so unique in this world and the best country and then try to compare it in other instances to these other countries.
That is what the debate is about, because the United States is the only free country in the world that has this experience with gun violence.
This country was
that's how we're unique.
Had a very, very violent birth, and its life up till now has contained some very violent episodes. And
our violent crime rate is not higher than other free countries. Our gun death rate is astronomically higher. Our violent crime rate is similar to other free countries.
And again, is it legal, law-abiding citizens that have skyrocketed the gun crime rate?
In some cases, yeah. I mean,
now that's silly.
By the way, most mass shootings are domestic. They're incidents involving family members and people that know one another. 77% of homicides are people that know one another. A quarter of them are family members. All these mass shooters that we've talked about today, under the NRA's definition, the laws they've written are all they were all law-abiding gun owners. They all legally bought their guns.
It became illegal the second it crosses over a state line.
No, sir. No. You're trying to be cute here. They all legally bought their guns. Let's be very clear here. And I'll challenge you right now. Name one mass shooter who illegally bought his guns.
Who illegally...
Yeah, I'll challenge you right now. Tell me one. Just one.
Guns. Well, I'll...
Illegally bought the gun. Didn't fail the background check.
You
can't. They all, almost all of them legally, you can't.
Have that in my head.
Yeah. But you can tell me about Columbo episodes from 1978.
That show's great.
Right?
Columbo never carried a gun.
You're right. Exactly. And there's a point in that. There's a point in that.
Because he had 3 cops behind him. He would just go, officer, arrest this man.
No, they're all legal gun buyers under the NRA's laws, which are ridiculous and which arm people that are clearly violent.
Well, you know what? Both sides are trying to jockey for position with numbers. I know that the anti-gun people classify mass shootings and school shootings in ways that aren't even mass shootings or school shootings.
I classify mass shooting the same way the FBI does. 3 or more innocents killed.
There you go. Okay. Well, you know what?
And those guys are legal gun buyers. The guys that are committing the mass shootings are in almost all cases legal gun buyers.
Well, then
for the high-profile ones that we're talking about.
It's I'll have to look into.
And I read stories every day where a guy who lost his job or his wife was cheating on him kills himself and his family. You read about that every single.
That happens.
These are law-abiding gun owners.
And again, a registered car owner drove her 2 kids into a fucking lake. So again, when you're that psychotic that you mean to kill someone or do them harm, you'll find a way.
Well, no, maybe, but people who are
you will.
Well, maybe, because guns are used in 2 out of 3 homicides in this country. Killers don't go to cars, they don't go to knives or pencils or whatever else. They go to guns.
Look, it's
because they're well placed at doing that kind of work.
You know why? It's a very convenient way to dispatch somebody.
Absolutely.
I understand.
Absolutely.
And since they're out there, I want the ability and the right to defend myself on equal footing with people that have weapons.
I understand that. But would you rather de-escalate that arms race or continue to escalate it?
Well, as good as...
Do you want to have to live in a country where you engage in firefights to be safe and protect the people you love?
As well as they de-escalated booze in the Prohibition. That really worked well. They didn't come from over the borders and only illegal people. But it didn't bring birth to the mafia.
But that's fantasy again. There's
no, it's not fantasy again. It happened. It was called Prohibition.
Okay, well...
And it opened up organized crime, and people got booze. You know who didn't? People that paid attention to the laws.
Okay. Name a gun violence prevention group right now that's arguing to ban all firearms. Name one.
Jesus Christ.
Name one.
You know what? No one
Name
in
one.
there. I can't.
There are none because there are none. So it is a fantasy.
No one in their right mind would say that. They would be laughed out of whatever group they were talking to. You don't say things like that. The gun
in America,
no.
You can say about just any damn thing you wanna. Well, and people do.
You really can't. That's why we're sitting in my basement.
Good point. All right, you got me on that one. You got me on that one.
Yes, Keith.
Since we're not taking phone calls, I wanted to ask you.
Oh, damn.
Well, you can though. There are some.
Yeah, I know.
But I had a question. I don't know if you know, I'm a former law enforcement officer.
Yes.
Aaron's husband happens to be here as well. He's a current law enforcement officer.
Yes.
So I own an AR-15 that I had with collapsible stock. I had I had a pistol grip on it and everything. The day I retired, they told both him and I are standing next to each other. They told me in this state now, you're not allowed to carry that gun anymore. You have to get rid of all that stuff. Yet the day before, both of us could carry it, and now the next day, I wasn't allowed to carry it.
Can you still fire it at a range in New York? Can you still go to
I have to take all those things off of it. I'm not allowed to have it. And
No. I'm not saying, like, let's say it's available at the range. Like in New York, can you still go to a range and fire the weapon?
Not with various aesthetics on it, like certain stocks. A bayonet lug, because God knows how many children are killed in schools when a bayonet charge breaks out. Bayonet lugs aren't allowed.
Well, my point would be, I have no problem with you firing a weapon like that at a range. I've gone to ranges myself and fired AR-15s, AK-47s, you name it. I think it's a blast. My question to you would be, is that a weapon you need to keep in your home, or would you be satisfied, doing what Anthony does, which is going out, popping off a bunch of rounds and, handling that weapon at a range whenever you basically want?
Oh, no, I agree, but I owned it as not part of my law enforcement career.
I get that.
I owned it, and I was allowed to have all those things with it.
Do you need it for anything other than popping off rounds at a range?
No, not at all. But I guess the thing is...
We're not disagreeing.
Why am I getting regulations put on me the day after I retire that says I'm no longer an adult enough to carry that? And
because it's a dangerous weapon, and because it's been used by a lot of mass killers, and it's not designed for it's fun to fire on a range. I've done that myself, but it's not designed to fire at a range. It was designed for battlefield use.
You do understand that an assault weapon is based 99% on aesthetics.
That's totally false.
Okay,
well, that's totally false.
Let's take a look here. So take a look. Chamber's open. There's not a round in here. The clip isn't in.
Yeah.
This is a Garand. This rifle is from World War II, Korea, things like that, used. It is a semi-automatic weapon.
Is that still the U.S. Army infantry issue weapon?
Nope.
Why?
It isn't.
Why?
Because they figured out how to make a more efficient weapon.
Ah, we're getting right to it immediately.
But here is the clip that went in these. You'd press it in the top, and then you'd fire.
Yep.
As fast as you pull that trigger, these come out until you hear. And then you get another one.
I've seen Saving Private Ryan. I've seen Saving Private Ryan.
That's exactly.
You're going to actually argue to me that that's more efficient at killing in mass than a modern AR-15? Because that's not a good argument.
Well, I think it is.
I think it's not.
I think it's a very good argument. Open chamber.
So shall we walk through the differences?
No, we should walk through what makes this an assault weapon.
Are you ready?
And
you ready?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So first of all, pistol grip.
Yes.
One of the dangerous, and I don't want to point this at anybody, but one of the dangerous aspects or a thing that makes a weapon lethal is the ability to hold fire on target round after round after round.
Mm-hmm.
That's not something you're going to do with this weapon for a few reasons. Number one, rear pistol grip will help you steady the weapon.
Mm-hmm.
Forward grip with barrel shroud to prevent heating on the barrel.
The wood did that. Minimum
recoil on this weapon, plus detachable magazine that holds a hell of a lot more bullets than that.
You know what? You know what? Not in New York.
Yeah. Well,
not in New York.
Fair enough. But for soldiers on the battlefield and in just about, 90% of states in this country, yes.
Mm-hmm.
You can put whatever the hell you want in there. So that's what makes this weapon more lethal than this, and this is why our military no longer uses this weapon.
You know what else?
Wouldn't.
Like I said, the bayonet lug, which is very, very dangerous.
Well, we can have a laugh about a bayonet lug, but that's not a factor in this. You know that.
Here's the bottom line. A maniac walking into a place where people are unarmed.
When's the last time a maniac's used a Garand?
What,
Anthony?
If they weren't allowed to have this, they'd use that.
So when's the last time a maniac has used a Garand in New York or New Jersey or California?
A long time. I've never even heard of it. Never even heard of it.
Why? Why is that?
Probably because they could get this.
Exactly.
But if they can't,
because it's more lethal.
This, they will get this and fire rounds as fast as they could pull the trigger.
They've never used this.
What do you think that nut that walked into the movie theater was a marksman with his pistol grip and keeping?
I'll tell you what I think.
He fired.
I'll tell you what I think.
Rounds.
I'll tell you what I think.
Yeah.
I think if he had walked in with just a Garand, there would have been a hell of a lot fewer people shot than 70 people in less than. No, I'm not speculating. That's bullshit.
I think
that's bullshit. With the arsenal he walked in with, if you're telling me he would have shot 70 people in less than 2 minutes with a Garand, you're full of shit. You're just full of shit.
He only used his
no, he had multiple handguns. He had the AR. He had a shotgun.
Of course.
Yeah.
So
he had weapons of war, not a fucking old Garand that he wouldn't have been able to shoot 70 people with. He wanted weapons that could put a lot of fire on target repeatedly with minimum recoil. So he got the best weapons to do that with.
So you think if only this, or similar to the Garand, what is available to people, that we will stop seeing people getting killed in schools and movie theaters?
I think in those incidents you'll see far fewer casualties. That's what I think. And I think you know that too when you get past the bullshit and you're honest about it.
I don't know.
Because you're not jazzed by that, and neither is anyone else who wants to commit mass murder.
Again,
they pick the AR or they pick a semi-automatic handgun with a high cap mag. That's what they use.
I say 99% aesthetics. It's a scary looking gun.
No, because the only aesthetic thing you can name is a bayonet lug. You can't name any other aesthetic feature that does not directly affect how lethal that weapon is.
If you get an expert in both of these weapons, I guarantee you'll get a guy that could hit his mark with this just as efficiently.
Then why? Okay, so the military, would you agree that our military are experts in firearms?
Sure.
Why aren't they using this weapon anymore?
That one's it's lighter, it's easier to maintain.
Here we go.
There's plenty
better capacity, more accurate, better able to hold fire on target round after round after round, lighter ammunition perhaps. All these things make a weapon more lethal. Duh. Which is why the military now uses a different weapon.
It makes it more lethal for who?
For anyone firing the fucking thing, whether on a battlefield or in a mall.
Or a nut. Right.
Yes.
So are we going to legislate away everything because some crazy people use that? Why aren't we all driving cars?
We're going to strike a reasonable compromise.
Why aren't we all driving cars that only do 55 miles an hour? Why can I buy a Ferrari that does 290 miles an hour and looks great?
I don't know. I don't know anywhere you can drive 299 miles an hour and get away with it.
Again, yes, it's illegal.
Yeah.
But why is it even available? Some nut might buy one and drive 290 miles an hour.
Maybe. I don't know of a problem with that, but if there is one, it's something we should look at.
I'm just saying, you can't legislate to the majority of sane, law-abiding citizens based on the fact that some nuts are going to do horrible things.
That's exactly what you do, and every single... Listen, it's such a stupid argument. It's such a dumb argument.
No.
Every law... First of all, we're all equal before the law. We're all under rule of law in this country. Every law in this country applies to all of us, unless it's a law specifically tailored to a given constituency. So this notion that... Look, I'm a law-abiding car owner. Am I being oppressed by the fact that I can only drive 70 miles on the highway because some lunatic might go 90? No, of course I'm not being oppressed. I do it because I understand that those laws, by the way, which started to get enacted in the 60s and 70s, reduced the automobile death rate by 90% in this country in the 20th century. So I'm happy to go along. Now, this notion that you have that these weapons are not a problem in modern America, so why should you have to suffer is ridiculous. We have a gun violence problem in this country that no other free country has.
There is an amazing
There's clearly an issue here.
Gun violence problem within certain segments of society.
No, across the board. No, you're not going to get away with it's all a black problem, because that's bullshit.
I didn't even say that. I'm saying that criminal...
Give me your segment then. Tell me your segment.
That over 6,000 of these gun deaths a year are gang-related.
Wrong.
And all right.
No, according to FBI data, FBI Uniform Crime Report. FBI Uniform Crime Report.
That's where I got
1 out of 10 homicides in this country are listed by the FBI as being gang-related. 1 out of 10. And we have over 11,000 gun homicides, just gun homicides.
What is that?
In this country per
Bloods,
year.
Crips, Latin Kings, and then everything else is considered something else.
No.
The small corner drug dealer or this.
No, 10%. 10% are gang-related. And 40%...
Again, I'd like to see what the criteria for gang-related is.
I'll leave you with the sheet so you can have it and look it up.
All right.
10% are gang-related. 77% of homicides in this country involve people that know one another. It's not strangers. It's not the guy in the ski mask. And 40% of homicides in this country develop from mundane arguments about property, relationships, money, things like that. It's the guy who lost his job and blows his wife away and kills himself now.
Those tragic things do happen.
Constantly.
And
constantly.
But I'll tell you one thing. I certainly don't want to have to drive a 65 Rambler because some nut decides to drive into a playground.
Okay.
I'm
happy to abide by speeding limits. I'm happy to be licensed and registered as a car owner. I'm happy to have safety features in cars that were not there when I was a kid.
I love a good seatbelt. You know
Doesn't bother me at all. Maybe I'm just a better citizen. I don't know.
I love seatbelts. I put it on every time I get in my car, regardless of how short of a trip I'm going to take. But I also consider, this a seatbelt,
and it comes out.
This.
You had to flash it.
This is, but it's a safety feature for what I feel is something that the odds of it happening astronomical. But why shouldn't I, again, be on equal footing? Which I think if criminals get these and illegally use them and bring them across state lines and distribute them, why am I left to have to have inferior, as I say, firepower if I'm confronted with someone with that?
It's a red herring argument. I don't want criminals to get that kind of power.
Everything's a red herring argument.
No, it is. I don't want criminals to have that kind of power.
Isn't that nice? Where's your magic wand to wave and keep them from having it?
Well, New York is one example. You have the third lowest gun death rate in the 50 states, and criminals can't get that weapon in New York.
Again, law enforcement. No, you can't buy it in New York.
Fact.
You could illegally bring it into New York.
Right, so you have to go to another state to get it. That's a good gun law.
Criminals are very lazy.
It might tick you off that your gun laws work in New York, but they do. Criminals can't get that level of firepower in your state, and you're bitching about it.
They're never...
This is interesting. You're bitching on one level that criminals are going to confront you with AR-15s. Then you're bitching about the state you live in, which prevents criminals from buying those weapons. They don't get those weapons from here. Which is it?
No one does.
Do you want to have firefights with criminals? What's your complaint here?
Let me ask you something.
Sure.
Who can get an AR-15 and have it in New York right now? Only a criminal.
So it's not
By
about...
the way, only a
criminals
criminal.
can't get AR-15s here.
You drive to friggin' Pennsylvania.
That's
buy
not New
one,
York, as far as I'm
buy
aware. Did
one,
they merge?
and then bring it into New York.
Because Pennsylvania...
Now you have it illegally.
Yeah.
I can't go to a store and buy one.
Okay, so what,
I'm not allowed
well,
anymore.
Here's the telling question. What would you... So they can't get them in New York. You just admitted
Sure.
that. They have to go to Pennsylvania where the laws are weak. So would you rather have Pennsylvania have tough laws so the criminals can't get them in Pennsylvania? Or do you want you and the criminals to have AR-15s because you have a fantasy about, I don't know, being Bruce Willis or Schwarzenegger? Which is it?
It's no fantasy.
Which is it?
I would believe that would be.
Do you want to have the firefights with AR-15s or not?
One of the most horrific things in life has to be being threatened like that and having to take a life or watch.
So you don't want criminals to get AR-15s, or you do?
Of course I don't.
Then why wouldn't you want it?
Course
so you
I
want to toughen Pennsylvania's gun laws so criminals can't get them anymore, right?
Sure, I'm sure if we toughen all the states' gun laws, all the criminals will
That's what happened in New
give
York.
up and
That's what happened in every state. States with tough gun laws are not source states for
You don't
guns.
think that in many apartments and places in the city right now where it's totally illegal to have in New York City, totally illegal to have any fucking gun unless it's registered and impossible to get. You don't think there's maybe a few AK-47s leaning against the wall?
Where were they bought? Where were they bought?
Illegally.
Where?
In another state.
So do you want to toughen the laws in those states or weaken them so you make it easier for them to get those weapons?
You know, and here's another thing.
Please answer that question, because this is central to what you're arguing.
You're in fantasy land.
No, I'm not.
Because legal gun owners can't get them. You don't think they'd come in from Mexico?
Answer that question.
You don't think they'd come in from Mexico?
Mexico has laws where no one can get fucking guns. No, they're not coming from Mexico.
Right, just
they're
like
coming
drugs.
from here
they don't
into
want
Mexico.
drugs either down in Mexico, I guess.
So I'll ask you the question one more time because you're still avoiding it. So you're admitting that criminals can't get AR-15s in New York
legally,
and also admitting so far that they can go to Pennsylvania and get them.
Sure.
So would you rather keep it that way so they can continue to get them in Pennsylvania, or make Pennsylvania's gun laws more like in New York so they can't get them there either?
I'd rather have reasonable background checks like I have to go through.
Please answer that question, just that question, because it's important to your argument as to what you want the country you want to live in.
I'd rather have the availability of what they can buy in Pennsylvania here in New York.
So you want everybody to be armed with AR-15s and have firefights as opposed to neither party being able to get them?
Firefights.
Well, what's the point of it?
Firefights.
You're talking about fighting criminals with superior firepower, but at the same point now...
I want that option.
Okay, but at the same point now you're telling me you want criminals to have superior firepower. You don't want to toughen Pennsylvania's laws to prevent them from getting them.
You're leaving out the part where the criminals can get whatever the hell they want.
They don't.
Yes, they do.
They don't. They don't get them in New York.
You don't think...
You
can walk into a store legally and just like, yeah, here's my prison card.
Can criminals get AR-15s in New York? We have to establish this again?
No one can.
Then gun laws are working here. So you're contradicting yourself repeatedly.
Okay, then let's make steak illegal. And then you could ask me, can a criminal get a steak? And I'd be like, no, but I can't either.
You're not having
you're missing the point.
You're refusing to have a rational
You're taking it away from everyone because there's a certain segment that uses it poorly.
You either want criminals to have AR-15s or you don't. They can't get them in New York
I don't want them to, but I want the ability to legally own.
So you want AR-15s regardless of whether criminals have them. Is that right?
No, I want laws in place where criminals cannot get them, but legal.
You have them.
Law-abiding.
You have them.
Yeah, I can't get them either.
You have them, but you've been bitching about them the whole time I've been talking to you.
Did you miss the point, too, where I just said I can't get them
Why would you need them if criminals can't get them?
That's fantasy talk.
No, it's not. No, it's not, because neither you nor criminals can get them in New York
Go back to Prohibition. Booze was readily available.
It's not Prohibition. You can own many guns in New York. So don't bullshit on that either. It's not Prohibition. It's something very much in the middle of a level of regulation.
I don't see it.
So if criminals can't get AR-15s, why would you need one?
They can.
And not in New York. Not in New York. They can't.
We're going around.
No, you've admitted
that.
You've admitted that. You won't recognize something you're admitting. You've said they can't get them.
You are assuming that someone that wants to do harm with an AR-15 will not be able to get one.
They can't get one in New York. I'm telling you right now, I want you to show me. I'll challenge you to this. You can do this on the back end after we talk today.
You don't think someone now is illegally selling an AR-15 to someone else maybe
Where did the gun come from? Pennsylvania, you're telling me.
I don't know.
So the question then becomes, criminals can't buy AR-15s in New York. The source state for AR-15s used in crime is not New York. You're intelligent enough to know that. So the question then becomes, do you want criminals to continue to be able to buy guns in states like Pennsylvania and then run them across your borders.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the question to you that you have yet to answer.
There you go. So let's.
Do you or do you not? It's a simple question.
I don't want legal, law-abiding citizens to be cut off.
You're still not answering the question.
Yes, I am.
No, you're not.
My answer.
You still won't answer it.
I don't, because I'm not going to walk into your little
It's a simple question. Should a criminal get an AR-15? It's not a vexing moral query, Anthony.
It's a simple question, like save the fucking distressed ship or cross the neutral zone.
It's pretty actually simple. Should a criminal get an AR-15? Oh, I don't know. Yeah, a criminal should get an AR-15.
I'm changing the parameters of the test.
The parameter's been the same for the last 15 minutes. I can't get you to answer the question. There's no change here. Should a criminal be able to buy an AR-15 at a gun shop? Yes or no?
No.
Thank you. So then Pennsylvania should toughen its laws so that they can no longer get AR-15s. We agree.
Why can't I get one, though?
Why would you need one if criminals can't get one any longer?
Can we just have a chicken-egg argument? That seems to be exactly where we are right now.
It's not rocket science. New York has done it. Every other free country in the world has done it. It's not rocket science.
If you believe outlawing something keeps criminals from getting it, you are the most naive person I've ever seen in my life.
You just admitted it works.
I did not admit it works.
You said criminals can't get AR-15s in New York. Are you listening to yourself? I feel like I'm talking to a ghost.
I'm saying they can't buy them legally in New York because they're not available to anybody.
Right. Right.
So
what if the U.S. had laws that look like New York? Where would they go to get them? They wouldn't go to Canada. You couldn't get them in Canada. They have very tough laws there. Mexico, it's nearly impossible to buy them via retail. Where would they go to get them?
The same place.
Eastern Europe? Let's fantasize about this. Where would they go?
You don't think making something illegal in the United States opens up a new market for black market whiskey or guns or whatever? Drugs, illegal drugs in this country is a great example of how well
we've legalized the black market. We've legalized the black market in Pennsylvania. If we were both Pennsylvania residents, I could legally sell you an AR-15 without knowing your fucking name. They've legalized the black market. That would be illegal for me.
Yes. I don't live in Pennsylvania. I live here in New York.
Right, but we're talking about where the AR-15s come from, which you've admitted 10 times already. Because they don't come from New York.
You honestly believe...
So should it be legal for me in Pennsylvania as a private citizen to sell you an AR-15 without knowing your name?
Well, that's kind of bad business. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't.
As a seller, I'd have no problem with it. I'd have no legal accountability whatsoever. If you were a gun runner who wanted to resell that AR-15 for New York for profit, I'd be a great guy for you to come and see.
All of a sudden, you cross that state line, you're committing a crime. There you go. There's a law already in place.
But you refuse to recognize what you've told me again and again, which is that criminals can't get crime guns in New York and that they have to go to outside states with weaker gun laws to get them.
There are laws already in place. All you're proposing is legislating against the people that don't break the law.
What laws are in place in Pennsylvania that you think are so tough?
Cross that New York state line with a AR-15.
You're going to put a bubble across New York so they can't drive across the border?
Bubble again.
Yeah.
It's a look, I'm not saying that. How do drugs get
Should I be able to legally sell you an AR-15 in Pennsylvania without knowing your name as a private citizen?
Legally?
Yeah. For me, as the seller.
I honestly never gave it a thought. I think, like I said...
Give it a thought right now.
I thought it's extremely irresponsible. I don't know what...
Should I be able to do it legally is my question, sir.
Legally?
Yeah. Without so much as knowing your name, much less running a background check on you or keeping a record of sale.
Yeah, I don't know what you would have to do to tighten that up. I think. How
about arrest the guy when his gun is found on a crime scene? How about that to tighten it up? And by the way, 17 states have already done it.
Sort of like guilt by association.
Yeah. By the way, many states have already regulated that, but
they have.
It's not theoretical, yeah. Yeah.
Well, okay.
And they are the source of fewer crime guns out of state.
Look, I wasn't even saying that it's a bad thing.
Should I be able to legally
about it.
Should I be able to legally sell you a gun as a private citizen without knowing your name, an AR-15?
Like I said, that's crazy.
Should I be able to legally do it? I don't care if it's crazy. Should I be able to do that legally?
No. You should absolutely.
Hey, we agreed again. So Pennsylvania needs to tighten its gun laws. Wonderful. There we go. It's not so hard.
Tightening the gun laws.
It's not so hard to answer a simple question, is it?
Tightening the gun laws does not mean making them unavailable to legal gun owners.
Yes, it does.
And that's what
because criminals can't get crime guns here in New York, which is why 90% of New York City's crime guns come from out of state. They can't get them here.
You know what then?
Do you think they're going out of state because they like road trips? Hey guys, we need some AR-15s. Let's take a road trip.
Then we can.
No, sir, because they can't get them here.
In your world, we can make a perfect society just by making every dangerous thing illegal.
I never say anything about perfect.
No, you said that's exactly what
No,
you're saying.
I never use that word.
In a perfect world,
never use
where
that word.
Criminals, if something's illegal, they just don't use it or do it.
I never use that word.
That's what you're saying.
No, I said we can reduce gun violence, which New York has already done.
We could reduce car accidents 100%. Make cars illegal.
We reduced it 90%.
Make cars illegal.
No. See, that's another bullshit argument. We reduced car accidents. We reduced automobile fatality 90% in this country, not by banning cars, which you know, but by highly regulating drivers, cars, and roads.
Make them safer.
And that's what I'm proposing to do with guns.
More fuel efficient, faster, better. Nice. No, you're proposing that in order to keep criminals from getting something, to prohibit everyone from getting it. No. That's exactly what you said.
No, because the AR-15 is just one example. That's about where you draw the line in terms of military-style hardware.
What about my Garand over here?
I'm not too worried about your Garand.
Not too worried about that?
No, I really am not.
You don't think it kills people?
No.
You don't think
again, I don't...
only take out, what, 8 people if you're a good shot?
Can you name...
5 if you're
last I remember, you couldn't name a single mass shooter who's used a Garand, so I'm not too worried about that.
No.
The AR-15, no, I could run off a whole list of people that are using that to kill people in this country.
I don't know people that work in mines that use a pick and a shovel anymore either. It's called technology, and it's constantly advancing.
Right.
This was the preferred weapon during their conflicts.
Sure.
They saw some of its limitations and got better ones. So where do you draw the line? Here? Is this okay? Or what? The 60s? Can I get an old M16? From Vietnam era?
I think you're making the point. The point is that firearms are becoming more lethal over time, and there's a reason that the military doesn't use a Garand anymore, because they have a more lethal product with which to use now. That's why no military uses that weapon anymore.
You know what? An AR-15 is only lethal in the hands of someone that wants to kill somebody.
Which is why it's important to screen at the point of purchase and make sure they don't have a history of violence.
Yes, when I bought mine, I was screened at point of purchase. I took it home. I was very happy.
And I appreciate you agreeing.
And then Governor Cuomo overnight signed something that all of a sudden made it illegal to buy one, and to own it, it has to be registered. Never had that, but now I could break the law.
Well, New York already had licensing and registration for handguns, so let's not get too far afield here.
If you're allowed to get a handgun license, by the way, very difficult.
Right. Well, look, hey, I certainly don't disagree with you that the devil's in the details, and I'm not going to argue with you that every gun law in America has ever been perfectly written. But again, it's about trying to strike a reasonable compromise to reduce some of the clearly preventable gun violence we're seeing.
And that's why both sides have to be very vigilant in what they're doing. I know the NRA is always looked at as an extreme, crazy organization, but if they give an inch, you will see so much taken away.
Oh, that's bullshit.
And the gun. Of course. Well, you're supposed to say that.
Tell me how you've suffered in New York. Tell me how you've suffered in New York. I want to hear about the daily pain you're in. Please, tell me. Tell me of your suffering,
Another
sir.
Loaded question.
Yeah.
It's like when Mel
There's
Carmison...
33,000 gun deaths a year, but I want to hear about your suffering.
Let me tell you that
under the SAFE Act.
The great question...
Let's hear the tales of woe.
Mel Carmison once asked me when I was in a meeting with him, a question that I also wouldn't answer. What time do you wake up and decide how you're going to fuck Mel Carmison? How do you answer that? You just asked me the same type of...
No, I want to know how you've been infringed. I want to know, gun nuts live to tell this. How have you been infringed? Tell me of your suffering under the SAFE Act.
Infringed.
Tell me how your life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is suffering under the SAFE Act.
Is suffering under the SAFE Act.
You have to carry more ammunition. Your arms are aching. What else?
I can no longer buy the weapon I want to buy to put me on equal footing, to carry the rounds, the amount of rounds that I want to carry, that I believe make me safer if need be. And
so you can't own that weapon. You could go to a range and fire it easily, but you can't own it. So you're suffering from that.
No, you can't go to a range.
Sure, you can.
I want to.
Sure, you can. Even if you're exactly right about New York, which I'd want to check on. But you could drive right across the border into any other state and go to a range and fire any of these weapons.
I'm talking about protecting myself.
So you can't own a military-style rifle in your home. You can't keep a military-style rifle in your home.
I'm grandfathered in, but anybody...
So now if someone broke in your house, you just have to blow them away with a semi-automatic handgun with a high-cap mag.
Perhaps. Hopefully it's one guy. Hopefully, you know, and you know, give me the whole, paranoid thing.
Yeah.
Open up the papers.
That's the suffering.
Look at that. It happens. People do get murdered.
New York has the third lowest gun death rate of the 50 states.
Tell that to the one guy that's fucking getting his wife is getting raped or he's getting killed, or in Connecticut, a doctor whose daughters are laying on a bed burning.
Connecticut also one of the lowest gun death rates. Top 5 lowest gun death rates.
I bet damn well the last thing a lot of them were thinking was, I wish I had a gun.
Yeah.
I wish I had a gun.
Well, look, there's a lot of tragic incidents that happen, but doesn't change the fact.
There are on both sides.
It doesn't change the fact that you're, compared to people in other states, you're dramatically less likely to be shot.
I've done nothing but abide by every rule.
You're not a king, but you're not a king.
Owning and procuring my firearms and storing them and using them. And the only laws that are passed are against people like me. Criminals are not going to do shit about illegal
You've already
guns,
admitted that's wrong. You've already admitted that's wrong.
I don't think I did that.
Yeah, you did. You told me a criminal can't get that gun in New York. You've already admitted.
I said legally.
Right.
Go to an apartment.
And you admitted.
Go to an apartment up in the Bronx. I guarantee you'll buy an AR-15.
And you admitted they have to go out of state.
I guarantee.
So you've already admitted New York's gun laws are preventing criminals from getting guns. And you're right, by the way.
Go uptown. I bet you'll buy one.
You're right.
Go uptown. I bet you'll buy one. I bet you'd be able to buy.
Where did it come from? Pennsylvania, Virginia, Georgia,
it came from New York,
South Carolina.
Maybe it came from New York.
Not very often, my friends.
Before Cuomo banned it, maybe it was stolen from someone's house.
Only 10% of the time.
A lot.
90% of the time it comes from out of state. The gun laws work. No law is perfect. I'm not going to blow sunshine up your ass and tell you that man found the perfect law. There's never been a perfect law in human history. But New York's gun laws have dramatically reduced gun death in this state, and criminals don't come to New York to get guns because they know they can't get them here. That's why they go to Pennsylvania. It's not rocket science, Anthony. It's actually quite simple. It's quite simple.
Yeah, if you have a block of houses that are all shit, every rat will be in every house. You clean up 99% of them, and they'll all go to one house. And if you clean up all
What's that
the
house
houses,
called? Pennsylvania, Virginia, Georgia?
It never happens. You're in a weird fantasy world where criminals pay attention to laws.
You've already admitted that criminals can't get guns in New York. It's like I'm speaking to...
Legally.
Are you Sybil?
They can't.
It's like there's two personalities here.
No.
Are you Sybil? Put on the other personality that admits criminals can't get guns in New York.
If I'm Sybil, you're Marley Maitland, because you're not hearing a word I'm saying. Look, I didn't think we were going to change anyone's mind. I love a nice, honest, open discussion about anything, and I absolutely respect you. You're very informed. And this has been great, man.
God bless you.
I would have canceled today's show if it was anything else.
And I mean this. I hope you continue to have fun at the range.
Thank you, sir.
I don't give a damn about the fun you have at the range, and I love that you love it.
At Lad Everitt. It's LADDEVERITT. It's csgv.org, the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence. Lad, thanks so much, man.
Thanks, Anthony.
And Keith, what's up? Anything?
Yeah, tomorrow. You've had him on the radio before, and Ron and Fez used to have him. Don the Hypnotist is coming here.
A fucking hypnotist.
With Bobo. with Bobo. With Bobo, though.
Oh, with Bobo.
Yeah.
All right.
He's been wanting to come on. We said, all right, how are we going to do this? We'll bring him with Bobo. Look, maybe it doesn't work on the radio. Maybe it works.
We'll see what happens. You know what? It's visual, so it's a lot different.
Exactly.
We could see, my eyes are getting heavy. You know, something like that. I don't know. Whatevs. Okay, everybody else. Aaron, of course, Garrett, the lovely and talented Rat. Didn't have to do much today, did you, Rat? He says, love it. And, oh, my God. Michelle, you were writing about this. Very cool. I appreciate it. Joe, you going to be anywhere? Brokerage Comedy Club tomorrow night, Belmore, New York. Joseph Curry, my good friend. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you tomorrow.